This is the Martian picture of the Deep Space Probe brand. The largest mountain volcanoes in the solar system are lined up. It seems to be guarding this mysterious land. In the east of the volcano, a huge canyon. The depth is the 6 air monuments of the Grand Canyon. Deeply cut, the desolate Martian court. This peculiar area has puzzled countless scientists. Now, it's like a key. Opens the door to the Martian past. Let's walk into Mars together today. And from the stars to know our future home. This since the 60s of the 20th century. The human exploration of Mars is here. Never stop. We launch probes again and again, and traversing a long distance of 55 million kilometers, just to get closer to the red planet. The road to exploration alone has not been easy. Many probes fail during launch or arrival. Luckily, we never gave up. Those probes that managed to reach Mars, they take pictures, record data, analyze the composition of soil and pigments, just to find the Martian past. Was it ever a planet full of upgrades? Whether it has a warm climate and a vast ocean, whether there has been life, and whether civilization has developed. Back in 1877, Italian astronomer driver Iaparelli, lines crisscrossing the surface of Mars are observed. He called it Noli, which is what he did. In 1894, the United States astronomer Lowell, I also began to pay attention to these mysterious lines, and over the next year or 5, it was studied in depth. According to Lowell, these lines are not natural. Rather, the Martians are coping with an increasingly dry welded climate. Built artificial canals, after all, on the planet at that time. So is anything that has been formed. Panama is also in the making. Rowell believes that the Martian civilization, in order to survive, must have mastered the ability to transform the planet. Rowell's Mars hypothesis caused a huge stir at the time. People began to imagine what the Martian civilization would look like. Some people have even begun to conceive of ways to get in touch with the Martians. For example, using a huge mirror to reflect sunlight and send signals, shoot light rats, and even try telepathy. However, with the progress of science and technology, any hypothesis of Rowell's Mars turned out to be wrong. In 1964, the Mars photos of the Mariner 4 probe clearly showed that the surface of the planet is dissatisfied with the marble pit. There is no trace of any artificial canal. Subsequently, 3 more Mariner probes arrived on Mars. They discovered huge western volcanoes, the deepest and longest canyon in the solar system, and the lonely old marble pits that are still clearly visible after decades of power. But there is still no hope of any life. In the mid-70s of the 20th century, 2 groups of trappers called the Corsair orbit a rover landing on Mars, a more in-depth analysis of the Martian soil. It is to read the chemical traces of life. However, the results of the Corsair's fire were disappointing. The atmosphere is extremely thin. The main ingredient is carbon dioxide. There are only trace amounts of oxygen. Compared to Mars, the Sahara Desert on Earth, it's a state of limp with a high livelihood. On the Earth, the pit of the mighty plan is sealed up. Gradual erosion by water and volcanic activity. But on Mars, they can exist for decades. The movement of the Earth's tectonic plates is constantly shaping the Earth's surface. And Mars, due to its small size, insufficient internal heat, geological activity is not active, nevertheless. Scientists are still discovering some ancient riverbeds on the surface of Mars, splashes of lakes, and even traces of the ocean. If there used to be a large amount of liquid water on the surface of Mars, so where did they end up? 2004. Spirit and Opportunity rovers successfully landed on Mars. Unraveling more media for us, Opportunity landed near the equator, an area called the Plain of Meridiani. It photographed the smoke of the spiral on the surface of Mars and discovered a peculiar little sphere called a blueberry. These blueberries are rich in cold body elements, and it is likely that they are the results of the formation of the ocean bottom of ancient Mars. Opportunity also found a large amount of runate in Yinshur. This is another important evidence of the existence of liquid water and the spirit in the process of form. Its broken wheels unexpectedly threw off the surface, exposes the cold, rich soil below. All evidence suggests that there was once a large amount of water on the surface of Mars. Why, when did all this water disappear? If there is still water, where would we find it? The answer may lie at the North Pole of Mars. From orbit, the Martian North Pole appears to be covered by a layer of frozen carbon dioxide. But radar detection data shows that under this layer of dry ice, there may be a large amount of ice water mixed river stuff hidden. In 2008, Queenjuelu was in Juelu near the North Pole of Mars. He uses a mechanical pin to dig up the topsoil, found some white almost noon. A few days later, the direct white disappeared almost noon. Scientists have judged that they must be sailors, because in the low-temperature environment of the northern level of Mars, only sailors will biochemically disappear in a short time. All indications are that in the not-so-distant past, the northern stage of Mars used to be warm and humid. It is enough for the sailors to melt into the Industry 2 water. Mars looks at the color orbit to the vehicle. MRO radar data shows that the ice sheet of the northern level of Mars is thicker than the Enlil. It is formed by the accumulation of layers of ice formed at different times. This suggests that the climate of Mars, which once cycled repeatedly between warm and cold. The reason why the Earth has a relatively stable climate is because the existence of the Moon plays an important regulating role. And both moons of Mars are very small, unable to effectively stabilize the axis of rotation of Mars. As a result, the axis of rotation of Mars oscillates periodically, leads to a change in the direction of the two levels. As a result, the climate changes drastically. MRO 2.2's official policy data also shows that when Mars' two-level common sense prism is facing the Sun, will cause a large amount of carbon dioxide to be released into the atmosphere, evoking warm-time benefit, has changed the climate of Mars. Scientists believe Mars formed sorties, volcanic activity was frequent, a large amount of gas was released, forming the original Martian atmosphere. Carbon dioxide and water vapor isothermal gases absorbs the heat of the Sun to increase the temperature of the Martian surface, sufficient to maintain the presence of liquid water. A marble called Block Island. It provides strong evidence that Mars once had a thick, large-scale layer. This marble is huge, and if it hits Mars today, a huge impact crater is bound to form. But the marble pits formed on Block Island are relatively small. This shows that in the process of falling, it was resisted by a thick layer. The speed slows down, so the force of the impact is also greatly reduced. So what exactly caused Mars to lose its atmosphere and oceans, and it became the desolate appearance it is today? The answer lies in the Mars Surveyor's firing data. 1997 year. After the Mars Global Explorer enters the orbit of Mars, the magnetic field of Mars was detected to be actively weak. The Earth is able to have life. To a large extent, it is protected by the Earth's magnetic field. It's like a giant shield, resists the high-powered stream of subcurrents from the Sun, protecting our atmosphere and life on the surface. And Mars doesn't have such a strong protection for us. The Earth Capital Factory is the core of the experience of the Earth and Zongrongrong, produced by constant flow, and the volume and mass of Mars are much smaller than the Earth and cannot cool down faster. As the core of Mars gradually cools and solidifies, the factory also weakened and eventually disappeared. Gradually stripped away, eventually escaping into space. The surface industry is too watery to contend, or as prudent as the ground, moving into dings. Of course, there are other theories as to why the Martian plant disappeared. But what is certain is that in the long process of dazzling Mars, but the planet has undergone earth-shaking changes. It ended up being what we see today. Still, we can find evidence on the surface of Mars that it was once warm. Ancient riverbeds, lakes, red plains, and the volcanoes that whirl their tails, all telling the story of the planet's former emblems. So, is Mars really dead completely? Perhaps not really. This year, scientists have taken advantage of the Red Hope Field, which is located on the Mauna Kea volcano in Haveni. The existence of a false end was discovered in the Martian mass. False finish is a very unstable gas. In the Martian mass, it will soon be decomposed. Therefore, the false perfection that exists in the Martian mass must be constantly generated. There are many reasons for the false finish, which can be address activity. It could also be biological activity. Maybe sticking out beneath Mars. There are still microbes that are playing strong. They analyze organic matter. Unleash the fake finish, of course. It's all just speculation. We need more evidence, perhaps. Only when man really goes to Mars on the day, in order to finally uncover these secret groups.